programmes, and I am speaking on behalf of everyone here at the Society of Young Philanthropists. I just want to thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I just wanted to give a bit of a brief background. Basically, the Society was started to invigorate young people giving and kind of bring the world of philanthropy to life. And we have so far done a few parties, a few drinks receptions, and we thought it would be a great idea just to get people together to hear your voices, to understand why you don't give or why your friends don't give and what can be done to really change that among you. It's really exciting because we are building an app to be called Give London, which is going to help people give and reward them for doing so, which is going to be launched during 2015. And again, everything tonight is really going to help that as well and help the building and the construction of it. But tonight should be really interesting. We have an incredible group of speakers, and I just really look forward to hearing your thoughts and hope you all enjoy it. So thank you again so much for coming, and I'm going to introduce Katie Lantu, who's going to chair tonight. She is an amazing girl, the past president of the Cambridge Union Society, and she is going to come and introduce these wonderful people to you. So thank you again.
Thank you everyone, good evening, and thanks Lexi for having all of us. The 5 speakers here this evening all work or are heavily involved in charity and philanthropy, and are going to talk to you about the kinds of things that they do. There's going to be a chance after they've spoken to discuss and give feedback, so unless the speakers explicitly ask during the talks themselves, if we're just kind of in listening mode, and then at the end there'll be a chance to give your thoughts. To begin with, Antonia Packard will be speaking first. Antonia runs a domestic violence charity which gives grants and works on the issue of domestic violence at a governmental policy level. She's also on the committee of the Society of Young Philanthropists, who are obviously responsible for the event this evening. So, Antonia, thank you.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for having me. So I'm just going to speak to you a bit about the philanthropic work that I do, and I think perhaps the most useful thing would be for me to tell you a little bit about how I ended up doing what I do, and also the challenges involved in that, as well as the gratification that I get from it. So I run a domestic violence charity that I started about 3 years ago, and I never really sort of grew up and thought to myself, okay, I'm passionate about helping victims of domestic violence. I think that the process was much more sort of gradual and organic than that. But people always sort of ask me, you know, where did it all come from? And I've had to sort of retrace my steps to find the answer. But I think from a very early age I was always interested in gender. And I think the reason why is probably because my father was a feminist, in the sense that he cared a lot about women's rights. And he definitely had the view that both men and women should have the equal vote. So I grew up thinking that that was all terribly normal. But the more I grew up, the more I realised that not necessarily everyone shared that same view. And to be honest with you, it kind of sort of irritated me. And I guess confused me. So later in life, I became more and more interested in women's rights. And I think it's because during my university holidays I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and I became particularly interested in Muslim women's rights and violence within those communities. Interestingly, actually after that I went into broadcast journalism until I met a man who wanted to start a charity in his mother's name to help vulnerable women. And he said, do you want to do it with me? So I said, yes, I'd love to. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to do some research into domestic violence to see if it was an issue in the UK. So I did that research, and I came to the conclusion that yes, 100%, it definitely was. So just to conclude, I definitely didn't wake up one day knowing that I was passionate about this. It was more that I sat down and thought about different causes that bothered me and what I really wanted to explore, which led me to this. So when other people come up to me and say, you know, I really want to help, but I don't really know how, I would always say that the best thing to do is to try and sort of consciously reflect on the issues that concern you and that make you tick, so to speak. So don't necessarily look at what other people are doing or what the trends are. Try and really think about what makes you tick. So starting a charity has been both fulfilling and challenging. I think perhaps the most fulfilling thing has been that I've been able to really understand the nuances of an issue. So in this instance, it's, you know, what is domestic violence? Why do victims find it so hard to leave? What does honour-based violence actually mean? And what is the extent of the problem, for example? I definitely didn't know how enormous the problem was. And I definitely didn't know that there were so many different people who suffered from this problem, both men and women from totally different backgrounds, religions, races, cultures, classes, you name it, everything. And I think that's the problem about domestic violence, is that it's such a hidden issue. So, to put it in perspective, 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. And the police get a domestic violence call every minute, which is an enormous number because less than half of domestic violence incidents are actually reported to the police. And it was interesting because when my family, friends and other people around me actually realised what I did, I can't tell you the number of people who came to me saying, oh my God, I'm suffering domestic violence, or my friend's suffering domestic violence. So it's a much greater problem than we think it is. And also the issue is that victims find it so hard to leave. First of all, because they're terrified that the problem will escalate and the violence will escalate, but also because a lot of victims are brainwashed into genuinely believing that it's their fault and that they are incapable of living by themselves. So with all this in mind, we as a charity have had to pinpoint what we think the priorities are in terms of funding, because obviously, like most charities, we do have a limited pot of money. So we've sort of focused on 3 things really. The first thing we do is that we fund people called IDVAs, who are independent domestic violence advocates. And what they do is they're trained workers that work with very high-risk victims of domestic violence, so those women who are most likely to be killed. And what they'll do is they'll work with different institutions like the police, the courts, social services, etc., to protect the victim. And they do the most amazing job. And then the second thing we do is that we fund prevention workers. So those are people who will go into schools and they'll work with young children, teaching them about healthy relationships, which is something that's really important because you can't break the cycle of violence unless you prioritise education, really. And then the last thing that we do, which is something that we've focused a lot on this year, is campaigning and lobbying work. And we've been working with 2 other charities to strengthen the laws around domestic violence, so more specifically to criminalise psychological abuse and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control on top of physical abuse, which has been a very interesting campaign. I don't know if any of you have seen it in the newspapers. It's been around a bit, so fingers crossed we'll do well. So I think one of the main points to say is that, you know, charity work can be very, very challenging. At least I've definitely found that. I think perhaps the most challenging aspect of it is fundraising. So obviously that's the bread and butter of your work. But it's really, really hard. And when anyone's ever come up to me and said, you know, I want to help you fundraise, that's been music to my ears, because particularly for a grant-making charity, you can't rely on other trusts to give you money, because that's not the way it works. So often what we've tried to do is to part fund posts with other charities, which has lifted the burden somewhat. I also believe it's a very powerful method of giving as well. So obviously, because I run this charity, I have to oversee all the different types of work. But for anyone else who's interested in the subject, but for very obvious and understandable reasons don't necessarily want to start up their own domestic violence charity, there are lots and lots of ways that people can help. From getting involved in fundraising or sitting on the committee for an event or helping to lobby, for example, or something completely one-off. So, for example, one year I compiled lots of different stockings from my different friends and gave them to children and refuges. Because if you think about it, there are a lot of people who flee abusive households and when they arrive in refuges, they have absolutely nothing. So it seems really small and it's something very easy to do, but it really, really, really changes a child's Christmas. So I think, I don't want to bang on because there's so many people who are talking, but I think the last point to really say is that I really do think it's amazing what individuals can achieve if you really want to back a cause in whichever way you like, whether, as I said, it's fundraising or backing a campaign, or even starting a campaign. And I remember when I started thinking that it was so daunting backing a cause and doing all these various things, but in reality, to be very honest with you, I think that a lot of things are possible if you want them to be. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonia. Our next speaker, Charlie Bowmont, is the co-founder and managing director of Capstar Chauffeurs, which was established to give meaningful employment to former members of the armed forces. Charlie served in the Household Cavalry in Iraq and then worked in strategy and consulting. Thank you, Charlie.
Well, I feel a little bit fortunate here today because everyone else is coming to talk about philanthropy, and I'm really here to come and talk about my business, which is probably not really the entire point. But really, what I've started up is what's probably now being called the social enterprise. And actually, it is a very different take on how a charity is being looked at, I think, because what I'm doing is all about providing meaningful and ongoing employment for people who are finding life quite tough, but it is unashamedly a business. For those of you who don't know me, as I've just been introduced, I founded a company called Capstar Chauffeurs. All of the guys who work at the company are ex-forces, and we very actively try and recruit those who have been injured as well, and some of them very drastically so. As I've also been introduced, I did serve in Iraq a couple of times, so sort of saw life on the sharp end and understand what it was actually like out there, and actually a lot for a lot of these soldiers coming back, and actually the transitionary process, how difficult it actually is. I'll probably just go back to actually probably the motivations of what's made me set up Capstar, just to sort of paint the picture really. I promise I won't go on for too long. But we set it up just over a year ago. So myself and the co-founder were sort of idly discussing, we felt that as Afghanistan and Iraq, as conflicts are both winding down, that there'll be more and more pressure actually on the charities, as is now out of sight, out of mind. For the last 10 years or so, every day there's been the House of Commons, there's been another guy killed, there's been 4 more guys injured, and it's been very much front of mind. And thank goodness that actually that's now over, but there's, for all the right reasons. But the issue is now, it's becoming sort of slightly sidelined. Even charities as big as Help for Heroes are beginning to slightly struggle for where their next dollar's coming in. And so more importantly than ever now, actually, as those guys are being rehabilitated, we need to find jobs for them. Now, I very much recognise the power and importance of charities in the sector, but again, probably slightly controversially here, I actually don't necessarily believe it's the one-stop solution for everything here, particularly in the military. There are too many of them. They've all been established for very good causes, but they're now shouldering into one another as the room's beginning to shrink in size. There are 275 army charities, and 630 if you take together the Navy and the RAF as well. And it's madness. It's actually how many there are, and they need to start sort of slimming down in size. So that's just one issue with giving on this front, I think. And as I've already slightly alluded to, the transition can be a very hard one. I was very lucky, as an officer. I had a very good education. and had a lot of opportunities coming out of the army when I left in 2008. But if you think you're a young guardsman, who's been out on patrol in Afghanistan, and he wakes up in Birmingham missing one of his legs, you start to realise actually what a hard day really looks like, and actually, hopefully, if he does rehabilitate through, actually how few opportunities people like that actually really have. And it is really incredibly important that for guys like that actually that they can have the charities that really help them out. And they'll go off and inevitably climb Everest or row the Atlantic. But actually coming into a normal job where he can be a good dad and a good husband again, and actually have that motivation in life to get up in the morning and go to work is unbelievably important for his own sort of state of mind and his own sort of transition back into the real world. But I think the army is quite a curious place. For most of you probably don't know it intimately like I do. But the soldiers, they get recruited at 16, they get fed, clothed, housed and watered by the army. Their mates are the guys in the next door bed, and they have that sense of belief. It's almost like a cult, I guess. And all of a sudden, when you do get ejected out of that, you lose everything. You lose the clothes you wear on you lose your salary, you lose your room, and you lose your family, which have really become the military. So what I've really tried to do in what I've done is sort of slightly recreate that. Okay, I can't give them a home, but we do everything else pretty much for them. We give them clothes and everything else too, so that's all good. But actually, they have that esprit de corps again, and actually they get a bit of sense of purpose back, which is incredibly important. So really, I guess, just spinning it back to where we really started it from. So this is really a very new company, and it was only a year and a half ago we were idly chatting about it. And the idea initially was I would find a guy who I knew, Rob, my business partner, would do the same thing. We'd buy a car each, we'd get them on their way, open up our network of contacts, and it would all be brilliant, and we'd let them go. And so we started talking to a lot of potential end users about people who use chauffeurs, and really, I guess everybody uses cars to a greater or lesser degree. And that's really how the whole sort of ball started rolling. We started talking to people, they loved the idea, and immediately my telephone started ringing, I have a car to go from Enfield. It's like, whoa, hang on a second, I'm going to be driving in my car, it's not going to happen yet. I at the time was working with Jaguar Land Rover, went to go and see the chief executive, and he was very supportive because it's a very resonating idea, getting guys back into work. But he said, a couple of guys, Charlie, 2 cars, great, brilliant. 40 cars, a bit more interesting. For me, we can actually get this rolled out across London and actually support you properly. Because can you do this? And I went, yeah, of course I can. And so went away and thought about how we're going to do it afterwards. But that's really, I guess, how it all started. And we took the brave pill and bought 6 cars last September and started getting going that way. We've always tried to stick with at least a third of our drivers have been medically discharged. So it's not exclusive of those who are who have just been broadly from the armed forces, who find that transitioning process quite difficult themselves anyway. And that's how it really got going. We're now up to 15 cars, and the guys are really what makes the difference. Every single person in the business is ex-armed forces, so I've got the ex-garrison sergeant major who runs the office back in the headquarters, so he makes sure that the shoes are polished and the cars are immaculate and the guys are on time. And yeah, it's a kind of a working model. We recruited very carefully. I mean, again, from a bit of experience in the army, not all soldiers are perfect. I mean, most of them are complete rat bags, and they have to be handled very, very carefully. But we've recruited these guys in an incredibly sort of structured way to make sure that they're the right sort of characters. I don't care what injury they have, as long as they can carry a suitcase of 25 kilos in and out of the back of a Jaguar. And drive for an extended period of time, know London, have the right character, and do all of those good old-fashioned soldier things like be on time, be incredibly polite, be very, very well turned out, and probably more importantly is discreet. And that's really what you want your chauffeur to be anyway. So what we've really identified is kind of a slightly disenfranchised group of people who have actually got a skill set which is absolutely appropriate in a different area. So that's really, I guess, how we've managed to take guys from a totally different background who've never been chauffeurs before in their entire life, and already probably, and I'm being quite arrogant about it, but turn them into the best chauffeurs in London because the product's pretty is different, undifferentiated. The types of guys we've got there are very, very, very different. And I think that when it comes down to, it's not giving this, it is a business, but actually, particularly for the corporates, who are always looking to do quite a lot of box ticking. It's a very, very interesting thing. The only things they can do, they can either have an average company, They can have an eco-friendly company, or they can have this. And there's nobody else who's actually doing anything which has got such a corporately social responsible angle of what they're doing. And as a result of which, you know, we can wriggle our way into most people's office and find these contracts which give the lifeblood to this business. So really what it is it's kind of it's a new take. It's not charity, but it is altruistic, and I think that's very, very important in this day and age. The other thing as well, you know, we absolutely sort of said from the start, you know, that this is a lovely story, you know, but actually unless it is at least as good as the best chauffeur company in London, there's no point doing this. And actually where we've been very lucky, I think, it's law of unintended consequences, and the guys have been so adapt and just changing straight over, we have taken ourselves straight there. And I was very proud last week that we actually got recognised out in our first year. We got three awards at the National Chauffeur Awards, which is kind of like the Oscars, but Gatwick and slightly more glamorous. You know, but it was a real testament to the work. Actually, forget me, but actually that the team has put in, turning themselves from soldiers into something totally different, which is, I think, is pretty cool. We also, you know, very responsibly employ these guys. Every chauffeur company in London self-employs them. I'm sure all of you guys have used Uber, which is a great concept. But there's definitely space for us too, because, you know, if you're booking something for the CEO and it needs to be there at Heathrow to make sure he's going to get picked up, you're not going to book an Uber on your own telephone to make sure he gets there. So there's definitely space here for us. And interestingly, actually, all of the other chauffeur companies are competitors. Uber's actually nicking all of their drivers, but because we're recruiting from a different pool, there's potential that we actually are almost last man standing in the old-fashioned sense of what a chauffeur probably was, which is quite nice. And you know, for the development of the guys as well, it's not just a case of we're taking quite a senior non-commissioned officer who looks smart, sticking him in a car and expecting him to be a chauffeur for the rest of his life. I realise that this is not what everyone always wants to necessarily do, but there's other opportunities which, as the company grows, the bigger it gets, you know, we have a training manager, we have a fleet manager, we have a recruiting manager, we have an HR guy, then we have more ops people. So the ability to actually take a guy from a fairly basic role and actually pull him in, you know, and actually, again, it doesn't matter if that guy's been horrendously badly injured. You know, they can actually do those roles too. And we've got, you know, with 20 headcount, we've got 4 amputees working for us, and they never thought they were going to be finding a normal role again. So we're quite pleased with that. And I think really, you know, I understand, you know, the Capstar's not the answer to everybody on this, but it's just, you know, a snapshot of what can be done, I guess. We only employ 20 people, but for me, the model is fascinating. We found a service which is generally altruistic in its outlook and perspective, but very commercial in its own structure. So, you know, we can pay salaries. It's not always looking to go back and come for the next handout of where the fundraising needs to go. It's self-sustaining, which is absolutely key. I mean, there's another, you know, it's not just again the soldiers. I mean, my cousin Edwina Grosvenor has an amazing charity which actually is very similar. It's not a charity again, it's a social enterprise, which is called the Clink, and it's very similar in its outlook. Basically, she goes into hospitals, she sets up restaurants there, she trains the chefs, the waiters, the front of house. They then open up to the general public, who can then go off and go and buy lunch there. The same thing is bringing, you know, it's a totally different thing. It's not soldiers, suddenly it's inmates. But actually it's the same kind of idea, and actually I would suggest just have a look at that because it's quite a cool model as well. But just to finish, I just want to finish with a quote from one of the guys who I employed, who was a single amputee who lost his right arm at his shoulder, so they're quite badly injured. It wasn't just a scratch, as he calls it. He was ex-Royal Horse Artillery, Lance Bombardier, Danny Richards, who applied for 350 jobs after leaving the armed forces. They didn't get a single interview. This guy didn't really know how to engage with him. He got one job, and he made a couple of jokes about the fact that he got a scratch on the way into work, and so he left quite quickly after that. And actually, he got very bad depression after leaving the army. He got, you know, a couple $100 grand payout. He thought he'd won the lottery, bought himself a new BMW, went on a few expensive holidays, and suddenly realised that 200 grand doesn't actually go that far if you've got it for the rest of your life, and that's all it is. He's been a shining example of our absolute professionalism. Is now one of our absolute top drivers, despite having, you know, just the one arm himself. And you know, he got put onto us by Help for Heroes, and he turned around to me and said, you know, in the first interview, he said, "I don't want charity, I want opportunity." And I guess that's what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank Thank you very much, Charlie. And in a funny coincidence, I can also vouch for the Clink, which is at work our philanthropy syndicate charity of the year. So you should all go and have lunch there. The food is fantastic. Our next speaker, Layla, is a strategy consultant at Accenture. She's been dedicated to philanthropy from childhood and throughout university, and has focused on improving the lives of children, particularly at the moment, through working with Unicef to support children in emergency situations. Layla.
So first of all, massive thank you to the Society and Lexi for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here with my team. Wanted to kind of speak to you guys a little bit about our story, what I've done, and then kind of some of the challenges that I faced setting up NextGen and kind of where we are now. So to give a bit of context, charity started for me, and I don't really like to use the word charity because of all the negative stigmas that come with it, but helping people started for me when I was very young. The very vivid memory of my family's Iranian, and when I was about 5, we decided my father had a very cool career opportunity to move back to Iran, so we went back. Shocking, most Iranian families don't really go back post-revolution, but we did. And we were in the kind of what is the Hyde Park of Tehran, and leaving, waiting for my father to pick us up, and noticed a young boy, and my brother can attest to this story, called Omid, kind of going into the park at dark on his own. And I remember thinking that it was very strange, and my mother stopped him. And I remember actually identifying with him because my cousin is called Omid, and I was like, oh, he's kind of like my cousin. And so we found that he has been experiencing violence inside his home. His father had married a woman who was not happy to have him, and he'd run away from home at like age 9. So of course my mother sorted his dinner, took him home, we kind of took him under our wing and got him in a shelter and got his life sorted. So for me it's something that's been wired in my DNA in a really kind of genuine and in an emotional way since I was very young. So kind of started with that, and then I guess I was 14, I started my first like kind of charity project at my high school, raising money for the Red Cross and children exploited by child exploitation, and then also for Hurricane Katrina victims. So kind of my personal background. So went to university, philanthropy chair of my sorority, and then went to corporate America and kind of forgot about what charity meant to me and helping people, and I guess sold myself to New York City and just was working. And I guess a year and a half into my time in New York, I realized that I was missing something, and I couldn't figure out what it was, and realized I just don't feel that fulfilled by this intellectual activity that is my career, and needed more. So a few of my friends were quite involved with Unicef NextGen, and NextGen is a global movement of young professionals who support Unicef's work. And what Unicef does for me is it speaks to a cause that's very close to my heart, with children. So these people cannot help themselves. They are young and they have nothing. And when an emergency situation happens, whether it's war or whether it's kind of a natural catastrophe, they are not adults. They do not have the mental capacity or the will to make a difference in their lives. So for me, it was just obvious that I needed to get involved with NextGen. Fortunately and unfortunately, I found out I was being relocated to London. So got here, decided what's going on with NextGen London didn't exist. So kind of wasn't sure where it would go and how I would build kind of traction around it, but approached Unicef here and said, listen, like this worked really well in New York and I want to do it here. So that was about a year ago, and we have achieved quite a lot this year, and I think without kind of draining too much, you can visit our website to learn more, but we've definitely faced our challenges, and wanted to speak to you guys about some of the funny things I've heard, I guess, over the last year whilst meeting with people to get them involved with Unicef. So I'll start with my favorite one, which is, it's not my thing. And I would just stop and say, so saving children is not your thing. So what is your thing? Are you like too cool to like help kids who are dying in Syria from war and violence? And then people would look at me and say, no, it's not really that. It's that like the whole thing is not my thing. What do you mean? So trying to get to the bottom of why people don't want to get involved with charities. And there are stigmas. It's, you know, they're an East London crowd. They don't want to get involved in like something that seems, you know, whatever it is or isn't. So I said, okay, that's interesting. I'll kind of keep that in mind. After talking to people, well, I have a really demanding job. I just don't have the time. And frankly, my money is going to other things. Okay? So I have a demanding job, but I can still find a way to donate money. Okay, so again, another data point. I don't trust institutions. So I don't know what it is about millennials, but we do not like corporates, we do not like institutions, we don't like anything big, government, none of it. So I thought, okay, this is a problem, but I think I can handle this one. We can show them the numbers. So Unicef actually is very transparent. And I thought that's an easy one. And then I started to think a little bit more about, okay, so what else? And then I got the, well, it doesn't really promote development if you're getting money to people, you're not incentivizing them to actually create a life for themselves. And I said, really? So a 5-year-old in Syria, I shouldn't give him money because we want to incentivize him to create a life for himself. And then people will look at me again a little bit dumbfounded and say, okay, so these are the challenges that we're starting with, and I think that we can handle them. So started to think more about kind of the generation of people we're dealing with. So kind of these anecdotal experiences in mind. I looked back over the last year and I kind of organized my challenges, if you will, into themes. And those are personal values and kind of how that is important to think about millennials. Secondly, social values, their mindset, so some interesting points there. And then finally, the kind of macroeconomic situation. So first I will talk to you about personal values. So I've got all the data and research. I'm a consultant, so this is like, I've got my links and my sources. If you need them, I'm happy to provide them. But young professionals, we actually believe that we are responsible for the world's issues. So that's promising. Thought, well, people care. And secondly, not only do we feel responsible, but we don't work for money. So I don't know if many of you have looked around your peer group, but we want to have a purpose in what we do every day. And then again, I thought, okay, this is really good for my cause and for what I care about, because it seems that other people care about what's real and we can show them what's real. Second, so it's personal kind of values. Second, social values. So I'm sure you all experience this by kind of getting on Instagram and Facebook, but people love to have a network and love to connect with the network. Not only do they like to connect with you, but they also like to share very content-rich experiences. So they like to show the galleries they've been to or the events they're attending and so on and so forth. And finally, they like to do it in good company. So I thought, okay, something we can create. We can create good content and we can create a good group of people who really enjoy each other. Finally, the macroeconomic situation. So we are worse off than our parents, statistically. We make less and frankly don't necessarily have the financial resources to do everything that we want to do. And so I thought to myself, I don't want NextGen to be something that excludes anyone because they don't have the financial means to be involved. I want it to be a truly diverse organization. I want anyone who's passionate about children to be able to work with us and not feel in any way kind of excluded from us for that reason. So kind of taking a step back, that's kind of all of that in mind. How do you then create something that enables our generation, which, because we're targeting people between the age of 20 and early 40s, how do you enable this group to work with us, keeping all this in mind? So, kind of around the personal values, some of the things that we do at NextGen, at our meetings, we try to make it real. So, what do I mean by make it real? You raise X amount of money, that's this many water pumps in Syria. You are now getting water to this many more people. We had hosted an event, one of the co-hosts is in the audience tonight. If you donate X amount of money, that is 10 schools in a box. What's a school in a box? That provides education for X number of people. That is where your money is going. So we try to make it real for people. Secondly, we're working with a number of journalists and watch this space. I can't say who and what, but it's coming. To actually come back from Syria, we've been on the ground and we've seen the impact. To actually make this real for our broader network. So writing blogs for us, creating content that actually connects our network to the cause, which is what's really important to our target market, if you will. Secondly, around social. So kind of the content we're creating is very important, right? I want the team to be proud of what we're doing. I want them to be proud of our events. I want them to be proud of the blogs we're writing, and I want them to feel like they are part of something bigger. So we're trying to make that very pointed, and we're trying to keep that very interactive. Also, and I think this is a bit, I mean, it sounds fluffy, but some of the team knew each other before, some of them have just met, but if you speak to any of them, we have built such strong friendships, and they are beyond what we do day to day at work. They are kind of inherent in our relationships and the way that we want to keep working together. So it's not, NextGen for us is not just about kind of coming together to throw parties. It's actually, we care about the common cause and we are friends, like genuine friends. So I think that's very important in our generation, and people probably lack that sincerity, so being able to have that is, I guess, important to our team. And then mindset. So this is my favorite statistic. About 60% of young professionals think they're entrepreneurs, and only a fraction of them actually have their own companies. So I read this and I was like, okay, so it's really interesting. Everybody thinks they have a startup, everybody thinks that, you know, like, I'm gonna leave my corporate job and like be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Well, it's nonsense. I mean, statistics just show it. So how do you then take next gen and give these really ambitious young professionals an opportunity to be super creative, right? So you host events for us, you can create your own content. We are very flexible to enable people to feel like their events and their projects are their kind of little companies, and enable them to have that creative outlet. For me, for example, like I have a very corporate job. I love it, and it's intellectually very rigorous and exciting, but I love that I can work with musicians and work with artists to curate an exhibition. I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. So it gives people an opportunity to do things and learn things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And I think, again, if you speak to the team, that's something that's quite like exciting for them. Oh, I've always wanted to organize a music festival. Okay, well, do it. Like, we'll help you. We'll make the introductions, and we'll do what we can. And then lastly, the financial bit. So I think there are people who have the financial capacity to give a lot, and we work with many people who do, and then there are others who don't. So we want to make sure that we have a model that enables people to donate time and services, which I think is quite cool with Next Gen. So Unicef needs a website. We will help you, if you're a tech kind of developer, to build part of their website out. Or let's think of others. So we do work with Unicef Innovation Labs. And one of our key objectives for 2015 is how we can use our network to support the innovation labs. And you can Google Unicef Innovation Labs. They've done some incredible work. It's actually technology innovation in the field. And for us, it's about, okay, my network, Serena's network, Marga's network, Isa's network. We have different friends who do different things, and what can we do? We can bring those networks together and say, listen, Unicef are trying to do something in X country. You guys think we can help them and do it for free? And a personal example, so I met with the head of strategy at Unicef months ago. She said to me, we have this kind of massive strategic question we're trying to answer, and I don't have the resource to do it. I went back to Accenture, to my partner at Accenture, and said, so Lucas, is there any way that we would do this for free? He was like, yeah, why not? Let's send a team. So we sent a team of strategy consultants, 2 phases of work. We're about to do a 3rd phase, and are helping them answer some really strategic questions about where they invest their money. And that is us finding clever ways to help them become more efficient as an organization. So that's kind of overall what we're doing. Our kind of key mission is, the cause is children, and our objective is to enable young professionals across London to be able to interact with us however they please. So if you're interested, happy to chat. A few of the team are here, they're happy to chat as well. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Our final speakers this evening, before we hear from you, so don't get too comfortable, are Essie and Noah, who are from Big Change. Noah is a social entrepreneur who, along with Big Change, is director of the Strive Challenge. His background is in entrepreneurship and communications. Essie co-leads Big Change, focused on strategy and partnerships. Her background is in psychology, and she spent 10 years consulting on organizational psychology and culture. So they're going to speak about Big Change and their work this evening. Thanks, guys.
I think actually, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to talk tonight. The idea of why don't we give has actually been something that Big Change has been really thinking about ourselves. It was actually the whole genesis of Big Change started with 34 friends who got together to run the London Marathon, all tied together as a giant caterpillar, raising £250,000 as well as breaking a world record. They gave this money to 12 different causes that they were interested in and believed in, but actually a year later looked back and thought, where's that money really gone? What have we actually done? They felt actually quite unfulfilled by that giving experience, despite all the effort, the amazing teamwork and everything they've done to raise that money so far. So did a bit of soul searching and thought about, like, what was it? Why didn't that work for us? It was this incredible experience, and it didn't really seem to make us that energized, and they all have a real sense of social purpose. And so we're really interested in, like, what is it? Why aren't we excited for it? A couple of things that came up for them was just like, there's so much choice in the charity sector that we don't know who to give to. We don't know that our money is going to the right places or what impact it's really having. We also feel a bit overwhelmed by that choice. Then they were thinking about, also, you don't necessarily know like how much of your money is really going to the front line causes. And that's actually one of the things that a lot of, it was Holly Branson, Sam Branson, Princess Beatrice, a lot of these guys are very entrepreneurial in terms of their spirit, how they're thinking about things. And it just, a lot of the charity sector just didn't feel to have kept up with the innovation in other sectors. It didn't feel that it was that innovative, that exciting, really actually driving the change that they wanted to see. So they put their heads together and thought, okay, well, let's come up with something that does feel unique to us, that feels fun, it feels something that we can engage in, that feels like we're using best practice from a lot of different sectors, and how can we actually drive change. And they set up a big change, and 6 founders came together. It was founded 2 years ago. First of all, started as a grant-giving organisation, so looking at innovative, early stage projects that they could accelerate the impact of. So finding brilliant projects that supported youth in the UK. Focus on youth in the UK was actually really important to them, mainly because on our doorstep there's so many issues. The London riots were happening at the same time that they just raised the money, and it was like this wave of negative press about this disenfranchised, disillusioned young people. That wasn't what they saw when they spoke to young people. It wasn't what they saw when they were going out and meeting people through different projects. They were like, what is it? Why is charity and all the media focusing on all of the negative side of things? Actually, what they were like, our experience is, let's focus on the positive side of things. All of these young people have amazing potential within their own lives, but actually there's just lots of things that are stepping in their way. So they wanted to support projects that saw that potential within young people and actually help them to succeed in their own way. And that's what Charlie was saying earlier in terms of the ex-servicemen. It's the same kind of principle. A lot of charity focuses on the negative and on solving problems, but actually what if we focus on the positive and the potential in these people and actually think about how can we help them thrive? There's a whole heap of positive psychology that we've looked into, and actually shifting, Charlie's also looked at this, the shift from looking at kind of post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth. What is it that takes people from actually who've had a tough situation to grow from that situation versus to actually shrink from it? And that's what we really wanted to focus on. So we were focusing on identifying these early stage projects and helping them to accelerate their impact. But still it didn't feel, we were doing good work, but it still wasn't having quite the impact that we wanted to see. And so started thinking about not only how can we support these different individual projects and give money to them and raise their profile, but how can we actually help them to think bigger, help them to be more entrepreneurial in terms of how they're having impact. That's part of the assets that we have. We're entrepreneurial thinkers, we help them think big, we've got a huge network of different people that have amazing skills who can help bring profile and different skills that they need. So started actually applying much more of a venture philanthropy approach to the giving that we were doing. So it wasn't just about giving funds and giving profile, it was about helping them really think differently and accelerate their impact, probably 10 times the impact that they could have on their own. Again, we started learning, we were seeing that was really working, but actually seeing real similarities between the people that we were working with, that they actually all shared similar problems, but they all had a similar idea, and Charlie mentioned this again, there's so many different charities in the sector. It didn't make sense that there were so many different people trying to solve the same issue with the same spirit, the same mindset. So actually what we've started to do is actually bring those different charities together to help them learn from, share with each other and boost the impact of all of them. So we're starting to actually think about, let's build a community and actually help raise the game of all of these different organisations together. And that's a role that we can play as that convener in the middle. And then we started, again, you can see it's a bit of a learning journey. We're constantly evolving in terms of how we're thinking about these things. So we started to get the different charities to work together and to share. And then also thinking about how can we move from just the founders who were 6 of the original 34 and start to build a bigger network of young people that believe in the same thing, who believe in the potential of young people in the UK, who believe in focusing on the positive, who believe in bringing and connecting different people to come together to drive a positive change and a positive movement for young people. So that's where we're starting to go now, is to really build a community, not only of young people who have the same values and the beliefs that we do, to help raise money, to help raise profile, to help support the organisations that we're working with, but also connecting and learning from businesses, from other organisations, from government departments, basically looking at how can we learn from anybody who cares about this issue, who's got something smart to share with us. One of the examples there is actually who's done something cool and been really disruptive in their sector. We thought about innocent drinks. they really turned the drinks market on their head. They managed to be a very values-based organisation that made drinks fun and cool. The way they engage with their stakeholders is really different. So like, what can we learn from them? How can we apply some of that business innovation to the charity sector? How can we think differently about what we do? So Innocent are now actually mentoring us. They're helping us think differently about how we can apply, how we can do better in our positioning, how we can work better in partnerships. So we're trying to blur the lines a lot, you know, apply entrepreneurial thinking, business best practice, more of a community mindset to how we actually support these organisations. And we're constantly growing and learning in the way that we do that. I think obviously Virgin are also helping us. We've got that kind of entrepreneurial DNA, I guess, running through our veins. And Noah's going to talk a bit about how we're thinking differently about engaging our community in events that help them go on a personal journey as well. So really engaging young people in the way that they want to be engaged, not only through the projects that we're doing, but also through the way that we're building our communities.
Thank you, Essie. I really couldn't be more excited about being here to talk to you, because this could be a more relevant forum to talk about the Strive Challenge. And if Essie touched on why people don't give, I'm hoping you'll be able to touch on the changes answers to that problem. So the Strive Challenge was an idea dreamt up by myself and my cousin Sam, and we really wanted to achieve three things with it. We wanted to raise as much money as possible for big change, to work with amazing organisations around the country. We wanted to create a platform to sort of catalyse a conversation around life skills, which is an area which I think is really important and actually isn't getting enough sort of time from the government and educational organisations. And most importantly, really, we wanted to get together a group of people that reflect this idea of striving. It was really important that we didn't get any Tom, Dick and Harry with us. We wanted to get some people that reflect setting yourself a goal and working really hard to achieve it, and dedication, hard work, perseverance. So we got the likes of Marion Bartley, who won Wimbledon in 2013, to come and join our core team, Richard Reed from Innocent Smoothies, a lady called Fiona Waller, who rode the Indian Atlantic Ocean, a remarkable woman, a guy called Carl Locko, who is an ex-gang leader from Brixton, now reformed and is a figurehead for like the reform of gang culture in the UK, an absolutely inspiring person, one of the most powerful young voices in the country at the moment. So we were incredibly privileged to have people like that along. We also have various other celebrities come join the event to raise the profile, to get our voice out there. Again, we were really concerned with not getting a celebrity because they're a celebrity. We wanted to get people who really reflect our message, and by getting these people, in fact, reinforces what we're trying to say. Just to touch on the model that we used, participants paid an entry fee, which alongside the corporate sponsorship we raised price of the event, paid for the event cost, so then any penny we raised went to the charities, which was really, really important to us. What we loved about this event, because there's often a disconnect between events and what they're raising money for. And so what we really like about this event is, whilst the participants were fundraising for organisations working to instill in young people these attributes they actually really rely on in later life, they were also learning themselves so much about life skills. So like every day we were relying on teamwork, communication, perseverance, emotional resilience to get us through the day. And that meant every evening when we were in the hotels, it was really easy to stimulate conversation around this idea of life skills. And actually, it was really easy to connect our fundraisers to our cause and suddenly get them really emotionally invested and passionate about what we're trying to do. Other things that played to our strength is the fact that some of our participants were with us for more than a week, our core team even for over a month. And so that made it really easy for us as an organisation to develop really profound relationships with the people that came along. It wasn't like they just came around a half marathon and then went off. Our participants left feeling like they'd learned so much about life skills, so much about big change, so much about philanthropy itself, which is really, really awesome. And actually talking about that half marathon model, yes, financially it's a lot more profitable to get 5,000 people to come and run a half marathon for you, but in fact, it's a lot more profitable than organising a month-long, multidiscipline, mass participation, ultra-endurance event. But we're in it for the long term, and we feel like the people that came and did our event are sort of a really interesting community of big changers who together have the potential to create a profound impact on the lives of young people. We were also able to produce some really, really stirring content around life skills, which we hope to roll out across the country in schools to use as an educational tool. And one of our project partners is already doing so. Our academies are showing it to kids in classrooms at the moment. Whilst it was an overwhelming success, we are a young charity and it was a first-time event, and Lexi actually asked us to speak a little bit about sort of key learnings from it and where we struggled. And again, it's this idea of the link between our cause and how we're raising money. And I think a lot of people did struggle to get their donors excited enough about life skills to donate a lot. It's not as compelling as saying donate £5 and you'll get a mosquito net sent to Africa, and that will therefore save 2 people's lives in that year. It's really hard to measure the impact of life skills. We talk about it as serving sort of, it's an opportunity rather than a short-term fixing of the problem. And so, yeah, I think, I mean, without sounding too self-congratulatory, we did achieve a lot. We raised £750,000. We really put a big change on the map as a serious organisation with big ambitions for the future. And most importantly, we created this community of people who are totally invested and passionate about us as an organisation and want to be part of our future. What's the next event? I hear you say you want to look at your seats. In 2015, we're going to do a series of mini events around the country, so it's going to be much more accessible for people. Entry fees are going to be a bit smaller and it's close to home. And then in 2016, we're going to do another big event, starting from the south of the Capstar and going on from there. And another thing that we really want to do is we want to encourage people to set up their own events underneath the Strive brand. So if any of you have a great idea for an event, come and speak to me again. Thanks a lot.
Very much to Noah, to Essie and to all of our speakers this evening. So tonight has been a chance for you to hear their voices, but as Alexander said at the beginning, this is also a chance for the Society of Young Philanthropists to hear your voices. So we're going to take a 5-minute break now. By all means, go and refill your glasses. This is your chance to chat amongst each other, and then when we come back, we're looking to hear questions or feedback. It doesn't have to be a question, it can just be a sentence on anything that resonated with you, so either positively or negatively, things you really agreed with or things you really disagreed with, why you don't give and why maybe your friends don't give, and any suggestions that you might have to fix that. So 5-minute break and then we'll come back here and discuss.
We really wanted to get together a group of people to reflect this idea of striving. It was really important that we didn't get any Tom, Dick and Harry with us. We wanted to get some people to reflect, setting yourself a goal and working really hard to achieve it, and dedication, hard work, perseverance. And so we got the likes of Marion Bartley, won Wimbledon in 2013, to come and join our core team, Richard Reed from Innocent Smoothies, a lady called Fiona Waller who rode the Indian Atlantic Ocean, a remarkable woman, a guy called Carl Locko who is an ex-gang leader from Brixton, now reformed and is a figurehead for the reform of gang culture in the UK, an absolutely inspiring person, one of the most powerful young voices in the country at the moment. So we were incredibly privileged to have people like that along. We also have various other services come join the event to raise the profile, to get our voice out there. Again, we were really concerned with not getting a celebrity because they're a celebrity. We wanted to get people who really reflect our message, and by getting these people that in fact reinforces what we're trying to say. Just to touch on the model that we used, participants paid an entry fee, which alongside the corporate sponsorship we raised price of the event, paid the event cost, so then any penny we raised went to the charities, which was really, really important to us. What we loved about this event, because there's often a disconnect between events and what they're raising money for. And so what we really like about this event is, whilst the participants were fundraising for organisations working to instill in young people these attributes they actually really rely on in later life, they were also learning themselves so much about life skills. So that every day we were relying on teamwork, communication, perseverance, emotional resilience to get us through the day. And that meant every evening when we were in the hotels, it was really easy to stimulate conversation around this idea of life skills. And actually, it was really easy to connect our fundraisers to our cause and suddenly get them really emotionally invested and passionate about what we're trying to do. Other things that played to our strength is the fact that some of our participants were with us for more than a week, our core team even for over a month. And so that made it really easy for us as an organisation to develop really profound relationships with people came along. It wasn't like they just came around a half marathon and then went off. Our participants left feeling like they'd learned so much about life skills, so much about big change, so much about philanthropy itself, which is really, really awesome. I'm actually talking about that half marathon model. Yes, financially it's a lot more profitable to get 5,000 people to come and run a half marathon for you, but in fact, it's a lot more profitable than organising a month-long, multidiscipline, mass participation, ultra-endurance event. But we're in it for the long term, and we feel like the people that came and did our event are sort of a really interesting community of big changers who together have the potential to create a profound impact on the lives of young people. We're also able to produce some really, really stirring content around life skills, which we hope to roll out across the country in schools to use as an educational tool. And one of our project partners is already doing so. Our academies, they're showing it to kids in classrooms at the moment. Whilst it was an overwhelming success, we are a young charity and it was a first-time event, and Lexi actually asked us to speak a little bit about sort of key learnings from it and where we struggled. And again, it's this idea of the link between our cause and how we're raising money. And I think a lot of people did struggle to get their donors excited enough about life skills to donate a lot. It's not as compelling as saying donate £5 and you'll get a mosquito net sent to Africa, and that will therefore save 2 people's lives in that year. It's really hard to measure the impact of life skills. We talk about it as serving sort of, it's an opportunity rather than a short-term fixing of the problem. Yeah, I think, I mean, without sounding too self-congratulatory, we did achieve a lot. We raised £750,000. We really put Big Change on the map as a serious organisation with big ambitions for the future. And most importantly, we created this community of people who are totally invested and passionate about us as an organisation and want to be part of our future. What's the next event? I hear you say you want to listen to your seats. In 2015, we're going to do a series of mini events around the country, so it's going to be much more accessible for people. Entry fees are going to be a bit smaller and it's close to home. And then in 2016, we're going to do another big event, starting from the south of the Capstar and going on from there. And another thing that we really want to do is we want to encourage people to set up their own events underneath the Strive brand. So if any of you have a great idea for an event, come and speak to me again. Thanks a lot.
To Noah, to Essie, and to all of our speakers this evening. So tonight has been a chance for you to hear their voices, but as Alexander said at the beginning, this is also a chance for the Society of Young Philanthropists to hear your voices. So we're going to take a 5-minute break now. By all means, go and refill your glasses. This is your chance to chat amongst each other, and then when we come back, we're looking to hear questions or feedback. It doesn't have to be a question, it can just be a sentence on anything that resonated with you, so either positively or negatively, things you really agreed with or things you really disagreed with, why you don't give and why maybe your friends don't give, and any suggestions that you might have to fix that. So 5-minute break and then we'll come back here and discuss. Like 5, 6, 7, 8 minutes of quasi-Q&A, but don't feel that it has to be a question. So if there was just something that you wanted to mention, something that resonated with you, a point that you'd like to make, then by all means just kind of put your hands up and it can be a statement. It doesn't have to be a question, but really it's a question as well.
Be as contentious as you can.
Be as contentious as you can. Lexi has the mic and we're recording this evening, so if you could just wait for the mic to get to you, then that would be much appreciated. So anything that you'd like to mention, particularly around the theme of why don't we give, but anything that was sparked off by this evening or by the work that you do or by what you've seen. So somebody to kick us off. Don't all rush at once.
John, Nick.
Thank you for all the great commentary from the speakers. Really enjoyed the big change commentary and sort of emphasizing the positive aspects. How do you what's the best strategy for getting people involved and trying to do that in a life that's very crowded with other things and responsibilities, and it's hard to get people to come along and sort of hear the message. And when you do get people along, it is very inspiring. But how do you compete in a sort of crowded life to get the initial ball rolling and get the kind of critical mass.
So the challenge of getting people involved, I'll hand over to you guys for a kind of brief response, and then if anybody in the audience as well works in this arena or wants to contribute, or if any of our other speakers want to respond, then please feel free to do so. I'll leave you.
I think it's just make it fun, make it cool, make it something that they want to be a part of. I think that's one of the key things about our message of making it positive. It's something, if something's positive and it's got a positive energy and it actually gives you an experience that you really enjoy doing, and that you're using your own skills and you're getting involved in a meaningful way that gives you something back, then you want to keep going back. If it's something that is focused on fear and negative and is actually like all focused on the problem, then you just get a bit overwhelmed, and it can be something that you may do in the short term because you feel guilty, and then you're like, I just want to go over here and live my normal life, whereas actually drawing people into positive energy and then sustain that. The community we built on Strive, honestly, it was extraordinary by the end of it. There was this pool of positive energy, and everyone who's been in contact with us since being like, how can we get involved, how can we do more, how can we help you guys? We want to be spokespeople for what you're doing, and it's just, it was fun, it was cool, you know, it was simple.
Great, and I don't know if anybody from the audience wants to respond to that as well, by all means put your hand up, and when we come around to you, you'll say come to answer that question. So, next, I saw some other hands up. Yes, Sara.
Do you guys believe that charity is an innately human characteristic, or is it something that we can build onto someone's character by making it gratifying, etc.?
So, does somebody want to take that, or am I going to have to pick on something? Yes, great.
So, I think it is absolutely innately kind of in your DNA. Like for me, like I said, it's something I've just known my whole life. But I think for other people, it's about introducing them to something that resonates with them. And I don't know, like for someone, it might not be children, it might be, I don't know, anything else. But I think you can't train people to think differently unless you're dealing with a sociopath. I think we are all human beings, right? And at the end of the day, we are social creatures that want to perpetuate our evolution. And I think one thing that I'm actually speaking to a couple of our kind of journalists who are writing for us about is, how do you bring humanity back? Because when you look around at violence and the conflict around the world, people have lost all sense of mindfulness and have lost all sense of what it means to be a human being. And problems here are not real for people in New York, and just like problems in Syria are not real for us here. So I think if you can make something real for people, then you can absolutely bring it to them if it's not something that's like innately wired. But I think helping human beings is something we're all wired to do as humans, right? Unless you kind of not really wired properly, I guess.
One thing I just add to that is we've really struggled with the word charity. It feels a bit us and them, a bit like, oh, we're giving to you for you, and I think, so I would say that it doesn't feel to us that charity is necessarily innately wired, but the more you focus on the similarities rather than the differences, empathy and supporting other people, I think is innately wired, so you need to tap into what's already there versus like,
So, if anybody wants to own up to being a psychopath who hates other people, now would not be the time to do that. Anybody else? Who's next?
Can I just add something?
Oh, yes, you definitely.
It's just a really quick point. I agree with everything that you're saying. But I think the thing is that it is innate, but people just forget because they're busy. It's like any kind of habit. You know, we're all going off and we're working really hard, and for a lot of people they're like, oh, I really want to do something, but I just don't know how I'm going to fit it into my life. Oh God, I really want to help, but how am I going to help? But it's like any habit. When you get into the habit of doing it, it becomes second nature and it's just part of your life. But it's just getting into that habit, if that makes sense. I definitely knew when I was younger, I was like, oh, I really, really want to help. And until you actually start doing it, you're like, wow, it makes total sense. I can make it work with everything I do. But it's like bridging that gap sometimes.
Great, okay, I'm going to take 3 more, just as a reminder, you're welcome to have those questions, but they don't have to be questions. Yes.
Hi, thank you guys, it was all great and very inspiring. Just to pick up on the points about the innate sort of feeling inside, I'm a teacher and I teach at an academy in Croydon, and it's lovely. I've also taught at a nice Catholic girls' day school where you've got quite a sort of variety of kids. And I'd say that even in my really naughty classes where I go in and I'm like, oh gosh, because those kids are actually really nice kids, but they're just in an environment which is not right for them. And I was just chatting to Essie there saying about that I think this is the people that would probably need to be getting volunteering and early age. It's not just about giving money and all that sort of stuff. But because what happens is they leave school at 16 and they don't have their GCSEs. They're still nice people, but then they get put in an environment which then doesn't enable them to bring out that kind of nice charity sort of volunteering side of them, and they don't have people to direct them. So I don't know what the answer is, by the way. I just want to say that actually I think it's those kind of 14 to 18-year-old kids who they have got that innate kind of loving, feeling and caring and stuff. They just don't have anyone to direct them in necessarily the right direction. So if anyone has any ideas on how to do that, great.
Yes, you can.
Just to follow on from that, sorry Charlie, no, you're much better Orisha than I am. But I think actually it's even more important that our society and the people who are in a position, such as the Society of Young Philanthropists, do get involved, because the nature of consumerism and the other sort of trends that we find very prominent in the world today make giving and inspiring these people who are at vulnerable times in their lives. It makes it all the more difficult to get them interested in the community and the social justice, etc. Because all they're presented in the media and by their friends is let's have a perfect home, let's have a nice handbag, etc. So I think it just adds weight to the cause and the discussion that we're having this evening. And therefore that's an extra congratulations to you guys, and I certainly feel very inspired, so thank you.
So I'm just going to quickly, with a heavy heart, because this is a really interesting discussion, take maybe 2 more points from the audience, and then I'm going to give our speakers, anybody who wishes to do so, a chance to respond or say a final sentence. So did anybody else want to contribute? Please do. I saw some more hands up earlier and I don't want to cut across people. Yes.
I think one of the reasons why young people don't get involved in charity or give as much as they should is that they take part in such a world challenge when they're at school and raise £3,000, go to Peru for 5 weeks, and as a personal anecdote from a friend was saying that they paint a school or they build a school and leave and they knock it down and the next people are shipped and then they build another school. And I think if you have a bad experience as a teenager with large charitable institutions, it might put them off from giving later on.
And any last thoughts from the audience before we turn back to our speakers? Yes, Sara.
Hi. Something tonight has brought all of you guys together, and it's probably about helping people, but you're all going about it in a very different way. Who's right?
Okay, well, taking the advice to be controversial / confrontational, that's fine, that's great. I've got time for 1 more. That genuinely is great. That sounded very sarcastic. It was, in fact, genuine. Yes.
We've all been to parties where we pay 50 quid for a ticket for a charity, and I bet you there's one time in everyone's lives in this room you haven't really known what the cause is for. You just want to go to your friends again. And I know lots of people that have run marathons because they really want to run a marathon, and it's sort of their nails for charity. It doesn't even really matter whether someone knows what the cause is for, or does it just matter that the money's there and the funds are there to help people?
Thank you. Okay, so bearing all of those points in mind and the things that you guys have discussed and heard this evening, just passing over to you for a last sentence. 30 seconds.
So a couple of comments. One was around your point around children between the ages of 14 and 18. And I think what you also see in the developing world, and this is kind of putting Unicef aside for a second and kind of thinking about what I studied, if you think about the psychological place that these children are in, and one, the potential they have, and two, how vulnerable they are, it's the same across every geography. So just wanted to say, if you're actually interested in understanding the psychology of what causes these massive world conflicts that we're all raising money for, if you look at the psychology of the children, something that I find fascinating is this whole concept of suicide terrorism, how they get these 14 to 18-year-old kids to basically commit to these kind of what we would consider violent acts, right? And I think it's really important to understand how vulnerable children are, and to your point, it's kind of the root of where you're set up for the rest of your life, right? So I think if you look at world conflicts across any issue, whether it's children, whether it's kind of post-traumatic stress from having been in war, if you look back at your early childhood years and maybe some of the situations you were put in throughout those very critical years of your life, it's kind of very formative. And then just wanted to, yeah, that's fine.
I'm just going to quickly address both points. I think there is actually a place in the centre for all of the different models. I think they're actually really beneficial. I think, you need to fix acute problems with charity and people on the front lines helping. I think you need to raise the game of everybody. I think that's what we're trying to do, is like help young people all rise up and then provide opportunities in businesses. I think that's what's the great thing about particularly London, which is at the forefront of a lot of it. It excites me that there are lots of different models. There was a question about whether it matters that young people have the calls. I think it doesn't matter. Like, great if they're going to give money. I think it's a hell of a lot better for us as organisations if they do, because then they become advocates. They then spread to their networks, and it just, if they care about it, it makes sense.
Thank you, Essie. You addressed the point I was going to address, and you spoke beautifully on behalf of Big Change. So.
Well, just to probably pick up your point, actually, I've actually always had a bit of a problem with sort of big charity balls. I was rather sort of loosely involved in one that cost about £70,000 to put on, and they pillaged people's pockets for about 100 grand. And so basically that net £30,000, with a lot of people in that room were a lot poorer. They probably felt like they'd given quite a lot of money to the charity, and actually very little had actually gone to it. And so I've always had a little bit of an issue with that. If someone wants to go off and run a marathon and take 10 off me or whatever, that's fine, because it's all going to go there. But I think the big charity events I've always had a bit of an issue with. Sorry, coming to your point about who's got it right. I mean, I think you need big charities to be doing big projects, and you need big sums of money to be going towards that. From the likes of myself, it's very different. Where we've created a business where we've actually taken people away from social care and charity. So not only that, they're also paying income tax. So we're taking them away from healthcare, we're taking them away from social housing, we're taking them away from the dole. Suddenly they're actually net contributors. Further to that as well, and I probably should mention this, quite important here, but as and when we're actually in a position to do so, we're going to start donating some of our profits to charity as well. And it'll actually be to the military charities, that actually a lot of the soldiers have been beneficiaries of themselves. I don't want to get involved where that goes. It's really down to them. So it's sort of the virtuous circle, I guess. Now, that's one little part of it. There's only 20 people at the moment. Hopefully it'll be 40 or 60 people, and it'll be a more profitable company. But you need the breadth of everything. I don't think you can say it's one shot fits all.
God, there were so many interesting points. I don't really know where to start, but I think a lot of people were picking up on the fact that we do a lot of charitable work when we just put our hands in our pockets because someone's running a marathon and you've got to pay for a ticket to go to a ball or whatever. I think it's really important that we do that, and it's great that people do it in schools as well, so you're teaching young children to do it. But it does put people off, because people, I do it, I'm like, yeah, I'll give you 50 quid because I'm backing you, but I'm not really thinking about the cause. So I think when you were talking about young kids at school, I think it's great to have a mufti day and for people to open their pockets, but actually I think the thing that would be much more potent would be to get different sort of speakers in, to not ask for money, just to talk about different causes. So someone who's homeless to come in and talk to kids about what it's like being homeless, not talking about the charity, just talking about being homeless, for example. I think those sorts of talks inspire people much more, and I think as a result of that, people want to start giving. But I think we need to go in that direction for people to really, really engage with the cause.
So thank you very much to all of our speakers and to all of you for your fantastic contributions and for your time this evening, and of course to Alexandra for organising tonight. Thank you very much.
just picking up on what Antonia said, it's always such an incredible opportunity to hear people talk, and it really enables people to kind of engage and learn and forge their own paths rather than just writing a check. So thank you guys for making this such an interesting night. Just to finish off by saying tonight is kind of part of a series of events we are doing with the UN Foundation and Charities Aid Foundation to launch an event in England called Giving Tuesday, which is a day that they want to engage everyone worldwide in giving. It's a day that in 5 years' time they want every single person to know today is the first Tuesday in December, and every office is going to send volunteers out and every shop is going to donate to charity. So it's a great cause to get involved in. And so next week, Giving Tuesday is on Tuesday, December the 2nd, funnily enough. And basically we are also hosting 2 more panel discussions and also a 3-day fashion fair. So we're getting the best of British emerging designers to all come and sell their products to charity, which should be great. You all have the invites, and you're also all invited to quite a different event tonight. On Monday night we are having a very glitzy reception, very fashion orientated in Soho. We will have the invites to that, so do come along. And also come along to the panel discussions as well. We have a tsunami survivor coming to talk. We have the directors of fashion brands, a supermodel. It should be really interesting and fun. So thank you all again, and I will see you soon.